I got a question for you. Is it possible that there's a gap between what you think you're communicating on Sunday and the message people are actually hearing? If you're like most churches, if you're like most pastors, there's definitely a gap between what you think you're saying and a gap between what people are actually hearing. How do I know you have a gap, and what can you do to eliminate it? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you 4 things that you can start doing. Most of them you can start doing in the next 2 weeks that will eliminate that gap so that what you think you are saying will be what they are actually hearing. And when you eliminate that gap, people will move beyond Sunday into deeper engagement in the life of your church. So let's dive in. So if you're like most churches, there's an invisible gap between what you think you're saying, between what you think you're communicating, and what you are actually saying, what you're actually communicating every Sunday. It's not even that people are mishearing. It's not even people that are misunderstanding. They're hearing exactly what you're communicating. It's that you don't think you're communicating what you are communicating. You're oblivious. You think it's more about what you say from the stage, what is said during the service, than the whole experience itself. How do you know if you have a gap? How do you know if there's an invisible gap between what you think you're saying and what you're actually saying? Here's how you know if there's a gap. People aren't responding when you ask them to do things. Here's what I mean. When you talk about church communications and when you think about Sunday, what's the most important part of the service on Sunday for church communications? Altogether now, the announcements, right? But it's amazing, right? How everyone on your ministry staff, all of your ministry leaders, think that getting a stage announcement is the answer. It's like, if I could only get a stage announcement, if pastor would only mention my thing from the stage, everything would be different. And you're sitting there thinking, you don't understand. We announce things every time or every week on Sunday, and people don't respond. We make announcements asking people to serve, asking people to get into a group, asking people to give, asking people to sign up or whatever. We make announcements all the time, and a very, very small percentage of people respond. If that's your experience, then you absolutely have a gap. Now, to eliminate that gap and to help you think through what it is that you're actually communicating, we're going to talk about and focus on one part of your whole church communications playbook. Now, I'm saying your playbook. You may not have written down your playbook. I have a written down church communications playbook that walks you through exactly what you need to do to build a system that consistently moves people beyond Sunday, consistently moves them into deeper engagement with the life and ministry of the church, consistently moves them into a deeper and more comprehensive and more life-changing experience of God's love and of the life that God wants for them. I have a church communications playbook that does all of those things. And that church communications playbook is based on 5 essential tools that every church needs to communicate. Only 5. There are more that you can use, and yes, you have to adapt them to your specific context. But if you I've identified there are 5 tools, and I've been the director of communication in multiple churches for the last 20 years. Right now, I'm the director of communication for 3 churches. All 3 of them are growing and doing well, people moving beyond Sunday, because I've figured out those 5 essential tools and how to align what you think you're saying and what you're actually saying on Sunday morning. Here are the 5 tools. Sundays, your website, a trained network of leaders, email, and YouTube. That's all you need. That's all you need. That's right. I didn't mention social media. That's going to be a whole nother video. come back, check back. I'm putting up new videos like this all the time, at least one a week. And I promise you, we'll have one on why social media did not make the cut for 5 essential tools that every church needs. But that's Sundays, your website, trained network of leaders, email, and YouTube. Over time, I'm going to do a whole series of these, and we'll cover each one of those tools in detail. But for now, let's talk about Sunday, because it does all start with Sunday. Sunday is the time where you have the most people gathered at the same time, and they're hearing the same thing. Now, like I was saying before, it's possible, and I would even say probable, that what you think you're saying, what you think you're communicating, and what you're actually communicating are two different things. There's a huge gap there. Here's what I mean. What you do on Sunday communicates more than what you say on Sunday. Let me ask a question to help you understand what I mean. What does your order of worship communicate to people in your church? The way the worship service is set up, how much time things get, the order that things are put in, where they fall within the service. Think about it this way. Someone who's only come to your church a couple of times, maybe they're not a church person. If you ask anyone like that who's been to your services a couple of times, what would they say is the most important part of the service? I'll ask another question. What's the part of the service where the stage is cleared, except for one person who's speaking from this ancient book of stories and rules? There are some rules, especially in the Old Testament, stories and rules and songs and proverbs, wisdom, and letters. So you got one person on the stage, everything's cleared, talking from this ancient book of wisdom, and we say, this is the Word of God. What's the part of your service? I know you know the answer, but I'm going to ask another question. What's the part of the service where you've waited until everyone is there because you live in a late arriving culture? This is just a side note. The reason I put air quotes on that is I've worked with churches all across the country. They all think this is a unique problem to them. Well, our people just don't show up on time. Oh, well, our people are never on time for the service. That's most churches, okay? That's not unique to you. Now, here's another question. What's the part of the service where as soon as people sense that it's over, they start leaving? That's right. You knew it. You knew it the whole time. It's the message or the sermon, whatever you call it. Everything about the way Sunday is structured tells people that the sermon, the message, is the most important part. So if your goal as a church is to move people beyond Sunday and to get them to engage more deeply in the life of the church, are you consistently using your sermon to drive people toward that engagement? Most of churches, I'll even say 98, 99% of churches, you can watch them online, you can visit them in person. Of course, I haven't been to or watched every church in the United States, their service, but I've been to a lot. I'm sure you have too. It is such a small percentage of those churches that are intentionally using the sermon to move people toward engagement. The sermon series, typically, usually, normally, is something that's disconnected from everything that's going on in their ministry world. They're doing a sermon based on felt needs about anxiety or worry, or they're talking about marriage, or they're talking about parenting, or they're talking about trusting God or growing in your faith, right? Okay, all of these are wonderful things. I'm not saying you shouldn't ever preach on those things. But I'm saying that if your sermon and your sermon series is completely disconnected from the steps you want people to take beyond the service, to engage, to move beyond the service, they're not going to hear the steps you want them to take. They're not going to respond. They're not going, because what you've communicated by the way the order of service is and the fact that the sermon is completely disconnected from anything else that happens during the service is going to communicate to them, I'm here to hear this person talk from the Bible. That's it. Maybe this is why we over and over, we hear other pastors, it's not just you, we hear pastors and preachers all over the country being frustrated about their announcements, and they think the announcements are a waste of time. Why are we even doing these? Maybe this is also why you're frustrated, that you think the majority of the people in your church are consumers. And you can't get them to engage beyond just listening. And it's difficult to even get them to come back every Sunday. Maybe, I'm just throwing it out there, maybe the system, the order of worship that we've created, or maybe not created, that we've inherited, that we've all subscribed to, that we all use, is actually working against the very goal that we say we have, which is to get more people engaged beyond the weekend service. You don't want to just have people who attend on Sunday. Some of you are thinking, I'd settle for if they just attended on Sunday. But listen, God did not call you to create a good service each Sunday. He called you to make disciples who follow him and live for him every day. And the sermon is a huge part of that, yes. But you don't want to just invite people back to hear another sermon about living for Jesus. You want to equip them and invite them into environments where they learn how to actually follow Jesus, how to actually live for Jesus. When they come on Sunday, the best you can do is you can hope to inspire them, or maybe they learn a new idea about who God is or about what the church is. That's the most that you can hope for with a sermon, is to get them to listen, to get them to pay attention. So what if you got them to pay attention, but then asked them, follow me here, asked them to immediately practice what you preach? You know, normally you hear that phrase, hey, you need to practice what you preach. You actually need to preach in such a way that when you ask people to practice what you preach, they're more deeply engaged with the life of the church, the life of following Jesus. That you're asking them to take steps to move beyond Sunday, to not just be a consumer, but to live and to act as though what you just preached is true and will help them to experience God and know God more and follow God more closely and to experience his life more deeply. And if you don't think, this is a little side note for you, if you don't think the environments beyond your Sunday service, your groups, or serving, or giving, or those things will lead to if you don't think your specific ministries will lead people into a deeper experience of the life God created them for, then you need to work on those environments. That's a whole nother, that's not my thing. I'm just saying that's a side note. So from a communication standpoint, what I'm trying to do, what you're trying to do, is not just create a great experience on Sunday. It's to create an experience on Sunday that's not meant to be just like a single serve offering, a single serve experience, a one-time thing. What you're trying to do is to use Sunday as a launching point to move people beyond Sunday into those environments where they're going to grow, where they're going to be connected to other followers of Jesus, all of those things. And you can talk about, we need to move you from rows to circles, and we need to all those things. We all know that it takes more, you may not want to admit it, but it takes more than a great Sunday service to bring real and lasting change into people's lives. They have to move beyond Sunday. So how do we use Sunday to intentionally move them? Because what we're communicating right now, most of us through our order of worship, what we're communicating right now is the most important thing about our church is Sunday, and hearing the message that I've prepared. If you're the pastor, that's the most important thing. The way the whole service is set up communicates that that's what's most important. The way, no offense, the way you make the announcements when you make them, like you don't really want to make them and you're rushing through them and you're like, oh, I can't believe we have to give 3 minutes of our service to these annoying announcements. You may not say that, people sense it. And so if you're bothered, if you're aggravated that you have to give 3 minutes to what you really want people to do, which is move beyond Sunday, people will sense that, they'll know it, they'll hear what you're communicating, even though that's not what you think you're communicating, and they will do what you're telling them to do, which is, I heard the message today, I walked out and I said, yeah, I thought that was good. So that, for the vast, vast majority of churches in the United States today, that is the gap. You think you're inviting people to take steps beyond Sunday, but what you're actually communicating by what you do on Sunday for that hour, or for that hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes, what you do communicates to people that that Sunday experience, and specifically the service, is really, and specifically the sermon, is really all that matters. But what if you could think differently about the Sunday experience, and even, yep, I'm going to get in your business, think differently about what you preach and how you preach, so that when you invite people to practice what you preach, they are moving beyond Sunday to deeper engagement in the life of the church. What if there's a way to do that? Guess what? There is. If baptism is important and you want more people to be baptized, you look at some of these other churches, or you hear about other churches, and you say, how are they having so many people get baptized? They spend time teaching people about baptism. I work with a church in Louisiana. They do baptisms every week. And by the way, every week they do a baptism, they play a short video that explains what baptism is and invites people, hey, when you're ready to be baptized, go to our website, yourchurch.org/baptism, and you can learn more or sign up. So even when they're just doing a baptism, they're making that a call to action, because what they do is communicating something. But they also do, multiple times a year, they will have what's called a baptism Sunday. And so the pastor will preach, usually the week before and that day, sermons about baptism. What is it? Why does it matter? Where did it come from? Why is it important for me? And then give people a chance to sign up that day. Or some churches have worked out a process where people can be baptized right there in the moment. They have people trained, ready to coach people, ready to talk to them and make sure that they've made a decision, that they understand what baptism is. They understand that they're making a declaration of faith, that they're committing their life to Jesus as their Lord. They're accepting Him, and they're repenting, all of the gospel stuff, which is important. But I'm the communications guy, so it's not my thing. All of that important. They've figured out their system and their process, because don't promote it if you don't have a process. That's just a little fun little side note for you. I'll come back to it. But preach on it and then ask people to practice it. This church that I mentioned in Louisiana, they did that a couple of months ago. 122 people baptized in the same service. This is a church of 2,500, 2,800 between their three services. Over 122 people baptized on one Sunday, because they preached on it and then invited people to do it right after that. Do you think they would have seen that if the pastor hadn't preached about it? If he was in a series on, I don't know, something else, and then just said, hey, we're going to do baptism Sunday next week. If you'd like to be baptized, go to mychurch.org/baptism and you can be baptized. No. An announcement is not going to do that, because you've got to teach it and then ask people to practice it. If getting into a group or a class is important, preach about the power of community and learning from each other, and give people a chance to sign up for a group or a class that day. If serving is important, all churches, and I know that right now it's especially this case, the churches that I talk to and I work with, if serving is important, volunteering and being a part of the mission of the church, if that's important, preach about it. Don't make a 45-second or even 3-minute announcement about it and then get to what really matters, which is this truth from Scripture that I spent 15 hours of my week figuring out, and I've got all of my points with an acronym, and I've really honed how I'm going to communicate it, and I've got an illustration. What do you think people think is most important? Because you spent time on it. You spent more time on your sermon that week than you did thinking about how you could get people to serve. You spent more time on this passage that, yes, it's a nice moment, it's a nice learning, it's a nice insight, but it's not inviting people into a step beyond Sunday, a step beyond just hearing that single serve message or single serve sermon if you're one for the acronyms. But if serving is important, preach on it and then give people a chance to sign up that day. Stop announcing things and start inviting people to practice what you preach. And then preach on how you want them to move beyond Sunday, whatever that is. All right, stop making announcements and start inviting people to practice what you preach. All right, I said at the beginning that I was going to give you 4 things that you could start doing in the next 2 weeks. So let me give you those. We spent a lot of time talking about preaching. That's point number 1. Align your preaching calendar with your ministry calendar. I'm going to give you an opportunity here in a minute to go and download. I've created a free download, costs you nothing, that is the 5 essential tools, and I go really deep on how to apply all of these things. This is just one part of one tool. Okay, this is a really robust 5 essential tools, essential communications toolkit. So point number 1 of how you do this is you align your preaching calendar with your ministry calendar. I even give you, with the download, I give you a sample. Here's an annual calendar of what you could preach on, the different topics you could preach on the normal times of year that avoid holidays and avoid low attendance weeks, where you're saying these are the biggest steps that we want people to take beyond Sunday. We're going to hit those every year. And guess what? You can do that. You're going to see massive movement of people beyond Sunday, and you'll still have plenty of time to preach sermon series that are not directly connected to the ministry initiative that's happening at that point. I'll show you how to do it. So you got to download it. And I'll tell you how to do that here in a minute. So number 1 is align your preaching calendar with your ministry calendar. Number 2 is develop consistent language for inviting people beyond Sunday. I really get into that a lot in the download, because if you want people to remember it, you have to repeat it. If you want people to remember it, you have to repeat it, right? And you probably heard something like that in seminary, but it was always within the context of one single message. Guess what? It's even more true when it's week after week after week. If you want people to remember it, you have to repeat it. You should have consistent language that you use to invite people to move beyond Sunday, that everyone on your team who speaks from the stage uses some of those same phrases and gives those same calls to action. Should be the same every week. If you want people to remember it, you have to repeat it. Third is build a clear connection pathway. Most churches actually have this, right? Like fill out the card. Go to online and fill out this form if you want to get connected, if you want to learn more information, or if you're ready to sign up to be baptized. Most people have that clear connection pathway. And this is where, like I said before, do not promote something that you're not prepared to process. So I go into detail of the ways I've found that can work best in the download, in the Essential Communication Toolkit. And then the fourth this is really important, massively important, establish new metrics for Sunday wins, because you're going to want to start to track movement, not moments. You're not just going to say, that was a great moment in worship, or that insight really hit home, or A lot of people came up to the altar afterwards. Those are wonderful things. I'm not saying don't do those things. I'm saying that's not enough. That's not enough. A great moment and a great Sunday is not enough to consistently produce lifelong change in people's lives. There's got to be more than a moment. You have to invite them to take a step. You have to invite them to move. So you're going to move from tracking moments or thinking about moments to tracking movement. How many people signed up? How many people signed up? How many people told us they were interested? How many people are going to get involved? How many people are going to serve? How many people are taking those steps toward deeper engagement? That should be Sunday metrics that your team looks at. Yes, your worship department should be responsible for that. You as the pastor should feel responsible for that. That's not just an announcement thing. That's not just a communication person thing, because too many churches, and yes, I'm speaking as the communication guy, too many churches communicate something completely different than what they've told the communication director is important that day. And so you have two competing messages, and guess who's going to win that? The pastor or the communication director? The pastor's message that gets the bulk of the service, and I've already said this. Don't need to say it again. Okay, so establish new metrics for Sunday wins that the whole team owns. Now, here's how you do it. I want to tell you how to download the toolkit because look, this is a problem that most churches have. Okay, they struggle to move people beyond Sunday. You're not alone, and honestly, it's not your fault. I've really come to believe that this is not the fault of individual pastors and individual churches. We've all bought into a system of doing church on Sunday and a system of communicating of what's most important that works against what we say our goals are. And we don't even realize it. So you shouldn't have to struggle to move beyond Sunday. With the Essential Church Communications Toolkit, you won't. You won't struggle anymore. So I want to move your church's impact beyond just moments on Sunday and move it into mission every day. All right, so there are two different ways that you can get started. First is that I've been talking about throughout this whole thing. Get the free the free Essential Church Communications Toolkit that's got those 5 tools that every church needs. That's at sc3partners.com/toolkit. You can get started right now. You can download that, and I'm telling you, I say you can get started. You're not going to be able to implement that whole thing, all 5 of those tools right away. Start small, right? Start with a few things. Start with Sunday. Start with some other things that are in there that you can make some incremental changes. Start some changes and see how those work, see how you gain momentum, and then you can implement more and more. So that's the first thing, is to download the toolkit. Or if you want to go even further than just that free toolkit, you can get a customized church communications playbook, a complete playbook that gives you, it includes not just that teaching calendar that I talked about, but a full annual calendar of what you should be focusing on communicating throughout the entire year. It also breaks down what you should communicate through which of these 5 communication channels, which of your initiatives, events, ministries should be communicated through this tool, through that tool, through this tool, through that tool. Breaks all of that down. It literally gives you a playbook. You can get a customized church communications playbook specifically for your church at sc3partners.com/playbook. Thank you so much for hanging in with this today, because look, I hate that churches struggle to move beyond Sunday. I was a worship leader. I was a worship leader for 15 years. I hated announcements. And I started to realize that we were working at cross purposes. We were working against ourselves in the way, in what we presented, in what we did literally on a Sunday. And so if you can eliminate that gap between what you think you're communicating and what you're actually communicating, that's when you're going to move people beyond Sunday. That's when they're going to experience more of the life of Jesus, the life that God created them to live. is when you align with what you're with what you think you're saying and what you're actually saying, and people will respond. They will move, and then ultimately it's going to move your church's impact beyond Sunday, and that's what I really want for you.